It's great to see everybody. Hope you're doing well. As Megan said, I cannot believe May has arrived. We are officially here. Hope you're all doing well. And I can't believe we're starting to think of, what have we accomplished halfway through almost this year? Like, how fast is it going? Hopefully it feels just as fast for all of you as it's been for me, and trying to keep up. But great to be with you all. I'm Jess Beakley. I am with UPMC and wanted to just take a minute first to see if we do have any team members that are joining us for the first time. I know I recognize most names, but want to leave space for anyone who might want to introduce themselves if this is their first time with the group. And same, we'll also ask everyone to pop in the chat if you have been with us before, just a reminder of your role, the organization that you're with in the chat, just to remind everyone where you're coming from and who's participating today. But anyone new with us?
Can share. I think Catherine and I are both new, and I'm Kelly O'Malley. I'm the manager of organization effectiveness at NYU Langone Health.
Yes, hi everyone. And my name is Dr. Catherine Lang, and Kathy is just fine. And I'm the Vice President of Nursing and Patient Care Services at one of the hospitals within the enterprise, NYU Langone, Suffolk.
Wonderful. Thank you both for being with us today. And we are so excited to get to hear more from you during our time today, and appreciate everyone popping in the chat with their introductions as well. And I'll just start off and say, before I know, Megan, I'm sure you have some items of business before we get rolling, but I wanted to say I had the opportunity to join the NCHL Summit last week at Ohio Health, and just wanted to compliment the NCHL team. I got to meet Ben real live in person there. It was fantastic. And for all of your work for setting up, I think what turned out to be a really nice interaction over the course of a couple days. A lot of learning, I will say. We had what they're calling a derecho or a Dericho come through Pittsburgh on Tuesday. So it's that kind of a strong wind ahead of thunderstorms. I have 4 huge trees down in my yard currently. And I've been thinking back and reflecting on the leaders who talked about leading through natural disasters, and how they supported their staff, because I think we still have 40% of the Pittsburgh population out of service today. So anyway, lots of great learnings, and just really appreciated that opportunity from NCHL and our Ohio Health partners. So want to put that plug in there to encourage you to think about the fall summit that I think Megan will talk about momentarily. But you just meet fantastic people, really get a chance to come together and hear best practices, and leave with a lot of great ideas. So thank you for that. And I'll turn it over to you, Megan, if you want to go over NCHL business.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. It was great to see you and Ben in Columbus. So yes, thanks everyone. I'm Megan Hussein, Senior Director of Communications and Development, filling in the interim to support all of the Lens activities while we recruit and hire a new senior manager. As you all know, Jen Petit recently left the organization for a great opportunity managing the diabetic clinical trials with U Chicago. So she is super passionate about that work, and you'll find her overlapping with U Chicago. But I'm sad to see her leave, but happy to rejoin and re-engage with each of you. So some of our updates right now are the Spring Summer Summit recap, like Jess just mentioned. We were in Columbus last week. We had about 75 attendees, and we focused really on the well-being work with undertones of leadership development, I will say. I think Jess and I came out of that meeting saying they kind of go hand in hand. You can't do one without the other. So it was an exciting event. Our fall conference, though, will quickly approach. So we are still accepting abstracts for that event. If you are interested in submitting content or an abstract for consideration, that deadline is May 15th. So it's been open for 5 months. It closes in 2 weeks. So now's the time to submit if you have something for us to consider. This council schedule, you may have seen a cancellation notice go out yesterday for the July council. So I just want to put that out that we will still meet as planned in June and August, but summer just seems to overtake people. So I think it was just a good decision to go ahead and move the July meeting. And then finally, save the date if it's not already for that fall conference. It's November 17th and 18th at the Drake Hotel again in Chicago. Registration and event information, including a shell agenda, will be shared soon. And alongside that summit, we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Gail Warden Leadership Excellence Award. So nominations for that award are also open now until May 31st. So if you have a leader you would like to acknowledge, I would highly suggest you submit a nomination for consideration. And then we also have sponsorship packages and individual tickets available for that event right now. Just two more, then I'm going to hand it over to you, Kelly and Kathy. So I also wanted to give everyone a heads up that we're really pleased to welcome two new members to the LENS program. So you'll see some new faces over the summer meetings. Keck Medicine and High Point University will join us this summer sometime. So if you see some new faces, that's probably where they're hailing from on this council. And then next, I'm just really excited to introduce today's guest speakers. So Kelly O'Malley and Kathy Lang from NYU Langone will be presenting Padlet Power, Advancing Nursing Leadership Through Micro Learning. And I'll invite Kelly to go ahead and share your screen now. But if anyone has questions about the updates I just shared, feel free to email me, chat me during this call, etc. But thank you again, Jess. And I think we're ready to get started.
Great. And thank you guys so much for having us. Just a fun fact, this was actually, we submitted this for last year's conference, and we were so excited it got to have another life and come out somewhere because we're very proud of the work we were able to do. So can you just roll a moment to get my screen up? All right, so we've already introduced ourselves. Kathy and I have been working together for about 2 years now, and I'm going to hand it over to her, talk a little bit or about what we're going to go through today.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. So really what our goal is for everybody to really understand the technology behind Padlet and how we were able to capitalize that to help new leaders gain knowledge and understanding about new and current trends in leadership. And then most importantly, that they didn't see this as a chore, but rather as a fun activity that we were doing where we could share knowledge and ideas. Next slide, Kel. So this is really true, right? People often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing, and that's why we recommend taking a shower daily. And that really hits the nail on the head about what we're really talking about here, because through change and through constant mandates and deadlines, how do you continue to motivate new leaders to want to continue to grow and learn and increase their leadership acumen? So I want to talk a little bit about how this happened, right? So when I first got to NYU Langone Suffolk, we were still Long Island Community Hospital. We've been the last acquisition for the NYU enterprise. And when I started there, I really had a unique challenge. I had all new leaders in the organization, and I really needed to be able to figure out a way that I could start this quest for learning, and to make sure that it would continue and that the motivation would be there. So what I really was looking for was to try to find some sort of a solution that was flexible, that made an impact. So I reached out to Kelly, and Kelly and I really spoke about what I was looking for, and she really listened to what I was looking for. And then she was able to help create this micro learning approach that really supported these new learners in the way that they were going to be able to obtain information and then be able to apply it to everyday application. So what we first did is that I really sat down with Kelly and we really looked at where I was and what I had in front of me to be able to grow the leaders in the organization. We initially put out a a questionnaire about what the staff was looking for, the leaders were looking for. And then utilizing Kelly's expertise, we were really able to understand what our guiding principles were. And you can see what they are on here, that we had to have a strategic foundation. The topics needed to really drive themselves, the way that we could make sure that the staff, the leaders were excited in what they were learning. We needed to have a very flexible design, because when I started to talk to the staff, it was, um, how is this going to happen? Is this going to happen during the day? How am I going to be able to do the class, but also run my unit? So we really needed to have this flexible design. We wanted to make sure that it was going to grow community. And I spoke to Kelly a lot about that how were we going to communicate? There were nurses in the OR, in med surge, in the ICUs, in the ED, and how would we able to make sure that we had this cross pollination of ideas, suggestions, and their thoughts about what they were learning. And then we also wanted to make sure that it was very impactful without taking a lot of time for the new leaders to be able to complete the program. So we wanted to make sure, like I said before, that we wanted to make sure that this focused on micro learning. And I have to tell you, I've been in healthcare for 30 years, and I didn't really understand the concept of micro learning until Kelly explained it to me. And the more she explained it to me, the more I realized that this was really what was then Long Island Community Hospital, was a way to make sure that we could build this community of nurse leaders talking about what they were learning. And for me, it was really most important that it empowered them, that they can then start utilizing the information that they learned into their daily practice. So our objective was to really give them these bite-sized learning. And Kelly will talk a little bit more about Padlet, but when I say that it was bite-sized learning, I can't underscore that. We needed to make sure that they had a sense of community, so that there was trust in the way that we were going to communicate. We wanted to make sure that we also gave them an opportunity to ask questions about the concepts that were being taught in a way that was familiar and comfortable to them. And then all of that was what we were able to integrate into utilizing Padlet.
One thing I'd add on to that, Catherine, too, is there's such a focus on didactic learning,
Yeah.
but we think of like a coaching approach. People have the talent themselves. How do we bring that out in them? And micro learning is a great way of, you have the skills, but here's a little piece to help you think about how you utilize them.
Yes. And just to add one more onto that, when the first time Kelly met with everyone, it was probably an audience of about 45 nurse leaders. And I will tell you that she really spoke about that, they already had some of these concepts and ideas. And it was really a way for us to be able to really bring them out and to have them validate that they understand what they need to do and how to move a team forward. So we talked more about this, and this is again where I'm only as good as the experts I surround myself with, right? So as a vice president of nursing, the expertise that Kelly brought to the table from an organizational standpoint really helped us. So we knew that we were going to have lessons that were 5 minutes or less, because we wanted to make sure that it wasn't overwhelming for the nurse leaders. And so what they did is they watched the video, and it was like I said, 5 minutes or left. Then they were prompted to have a response. And then where the learning really occurred and the sense of community started to build was how then they responded to each other's posts. And they started to learn how different people thought and what department you worked in and how we can make this work. And it was only a total time commitment, about 10 minutes. Now, when we first rolled this out, I have to tell you that the leaders were a little apprehensive. Was it really only 10 minutes? How was this going to work? But the more we talked about what Padlet was and how we were going to teach them, they really were able to understand that. And on the right side of the slide, you can see that is one of the lessons that they listened to be able to then answer the questions that we were talking about. So the way that the program schedule is that our first week was the introduction, and then we were able to break it down into bite-sized concepts that we knew the leaders would need. And you can see here what we came up with. And for the leaders, the two most important micro series that we had was leadership and leading change and innovation. And as I met with groups and I heard them talking to their team members, you could really see that they were really able to actualize the new concepts that they were learning. And it was really important for me to be able to see that. And then, of course, I also wanted Kelly to be a part of that. So we would meet by WebEx, once or twice a month to really understand that.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about Padlet. So in full honesty, I have to give Catherine so much credit because she was our first guinea pig population we use this with in a big program. One of our colleagues came from the New York City Department of Education. She was a teacher, and this was actually a tool that they started using during the pandemic for how do we get our students more interested in learning by making it mimic social media, right? Instead of fighting against social media, saying, this is something we can bring in. So one of the big questions I think to start that Catherine and I had coming in is, what will it look like generationally? Right? We knew probably younger nursing leaders would say, oh, yeah, I know what this is. I'm familiar. So that's one of the reasons we did that first session in person. So I could literally just walk around and help people sign in. Because once you're in one time, it's pretty easy. But it's a tool you can use from your phone, from your computer when you look at it. So Padlet looks a little bit like this on the right. It's a digital collaboration tool. It looks almost like a virtual bulletin board. So you can organize it by weeks and pin your post every week to the top. So they see that as the first thing. What's great is you can add YouTube videos to your post. You could add a photo, you could add a picture, and I'll take a moment in a second to log in and show you what it looks like. But what you can even add is you can use AI. So you could say, create a picture for me that shows a nurse with their hair on fire, which I think someone created and I thought it was pretty unique. And it'll use AI to give you a visual representation of how you feel and what it looks like. So what's particularly useful when we're using it for microlearning is it feels like I'm coming on to check in with my colleagues, with my friends. I'm not having to check something off. It's not something that feels burdensome or heavy. And for leaders, it's a really easy way to track how people are doing. Do we see people interacting? Are we seeing comments? So I'll actually take a look after I show you a few of them. This shows you a little bit of one of our weeks. You'll see here, this is the one we pinned over here. It has our question at the bottom. We ask people, do you rely more heavily on critical or strategic thinking currently? How can you try to use the other thinking approach? Not making anything right or wrong, but really creating a space for creativity and exploring. And what's really interesting is we showed them how to add things, but right away, people were like, well, I have a video to describe that, or I have a photo that'll help me. So you'll see a Mission Impossible. You see over here on the far right, someone used it as kind of that detective. And someone put a Simon Sinek video in as well. But then they also talked about why it's important to me. And you'll see here some of these posts. People could like a post, they could comment, and it started to create that cross facilitation, which was almost more of what we were looking at together. There used to be a famous, if anyone watched, I'm going to date myself, SNL, when they used to do Jack Handy quotes. One of them used to say, while pirates were out looking for treasure, maybe the real treasure was the friends we made along the way. And I kind of think about this in here. Of course, we had a goal of what we wanted them to learn in the skills, but really, how do we help them to go to each other instead of always going up as well, which I think is something that we see a lot. We did one for managing or leading, and you'll see this one got a lot of comments. I think this was probably our most interacted with back and forth with people because they talk about a lot where, well, this works for me, or this is how I do it. And then we also, the one that I think I was most surprised with of how it worked is our last post of the series took a bit of a narrative medicine approach where we asked people to use creativity to explain where they were. So we asked them to find a piece of music, art, a quote, or a drawing that summarizes where they're ending up on this learning process. And just seeing all the different posts was incredible. People put in music, they put in quotations, they talked about where they're at. And this is the one where I think Catherine and we had seen the interaction, but we went, okay, we have something here. This is where we look. So I'll pause for questions at this point while I pull up Padlet, but anything that's coming up for people so far?
I think it's really neat. I don't know if I have a specific question. I'm sure that I will as we continue to go. I think the generational question was an interesting one. So I'm glad you tackled that, Kelly, because, and I think that just the value of even bringing them together in person that first time just to see how do they interact with it? What are the questions? Um, I'm not as familiar with Padlet, which I'm surprised. And I guess one of my questions would be, do you have other, we are big Microsoft users, so we use Viva, Engage, and all these other types of communication platforms. And I wonder if do you use some of those? Was there a little confusion with also using Padlet or your LMS? Like, did you navigate any of that?
So I'll add our LMS. We're currently on Saba, so it doesn't have quite the collaboration interaction focus that we might like. All of these other learning management systems are going to hate when I tell you Padlet is incredibly inexpensive, like pennies on the dollar of what we pay for some of these LMSs. And part of the reason is it is a tool for education. So for us, I think we were able to kind of bring an institutional license being an educational center. So to bring it on, we brought it on as a tool for the whole organization, and our learning and development team said, "Well, how do we find ways to use it now?" So it's a great question. Thank you. I will say, in all ironies, Padlet is down right now, which I've never seen before. I think they're doing a manual update, which is, as all of us know in the facilitation role, would of course happen when we're talking about it. But I can send a short video out when we send out the slides after that shows a little like example of how you would post in different pieces of it.
Sorry, I have a question. Since you said you did the first session in person, I mean, how many people are in your scope for this? But you also said there's an institutional license, so I'm just kind of wondering how it's used institutionally and kind of for this program, how the scope, since you were able to do that first session in person.
So, Crystal, I can tell you from an institution standpoint, it was really specific. It was for the assistant nurse managers and up to the directors that this was a program that we created. It can also be used for other disciplines, but this was really a time for me to be able to bring the team together, all brand new, to really see each other, talk to each other, and then it was specific to nursing. And I might be a little biased, but I do think that nurse leaders have a different thought process than other leaders within the organization. So for me, it was really important that we kept it specific to nursing.
Yeah, and the way to think about the tool is it's almost like you can create a message board for any topic. So we had one message board for this program, the first microlearning series, which, not to get too into the weeds, but no one else could see or go into the post for that group. And that's important, of course, to make people feel like we're not being watched and it's something we feel like we can be comfortable speaking. But you could create that for every department or admin role you had if you wanted to use it. Our leadership development programs are actually using this a lot now for boards, for their cohorts to talk to each other. And another great way that you can use it outside of a programmatic view is it can be used for brainstorming. If you have a big group, even this group, you could send the link and say, everyone answer that first question, and everyone's able to live read and interact in that way, which is very helpful. Let's talk a little bit about what we saw, because I think this is when we did some of this work, we thought, all right, we have something working for us here. When we sent out a survey after, we found that 83 of our participants felt very or extremely motivated to act out on their greatest takeaway from the program. 100% of survey participants used a tactic they learned during the program. 91% felt moderately to vastly more effective as a leader after the program. 58% felt an improved sense of community, which, especially when you think about during mergers and acquisitions, when everything else is changing, we were really pleased to see that number. And 91% found that Padlet was moderately to vastly effective in increasing their learning. And I thought this verbatim kind of covered exactly what Catherine and I thought from the start. At the start, they felt it was a bit intimidating. However, once my screen's in the middle, the videos and readings were attended, it became thought-provoking and exciting to see what my colleagues thought and what their solutions were. To show you a little bit deeper, when we looked at how many times people used a tactic, 50% used it 1 to 3, but we also saw people using things up to 7 to 9 times a week of what we learned. When we asked them who they talked about it with, we saw so much more interaction between colleagues. Like 4 to 6 times a week, they were talking about pieces with their colleagues. But we also saw that with their direct managers and with their direct reports. So it's something that it wasn't just at that level, but we were seeing kind of that upward and downward integration. This is a little bit deeper dive into, no one said they didn't feel more effective from going through this program. So, at the end of the day, I can check it off. We felt pretty good about that from an L&D perspective. And the sense of community, again, was very helpful to see. One person put in significantly less, and we always hope to think that maybe the scale switched and they went the other way, but it didn't really match with the rest of our survey. And here's our slide about Padlet deepening our learning. So just to kind of talk a little bit about what we learned, nursing leader-led conversations really matter. And I think what we're looking at as we go to launch this again is how do we do a better job of putting the right people in charge, of having senior directors start to lead the conversations? What do they think is important? How do they use the posts? And really interact to ensure people are commenting and keeping that up. And that really leads to that momentum piece. It's not a one and done, but how do we keep this going? It's easy, right? So if you get the good positive momentum going with this, it gives you a lot of space to keep it going. We're about to launch our second cycle, and we're very excited. For both cycles, something that we did is we asked people for the first one, using AONL competencies, what do you want to learn? And we told them what we heard before we even got there. We heard this from you. We're designing this for you. We've also done that for the second session. We opened it up a little, and we have some great kind of topics. And the nice thing, we have access to LinkedIn Learning. And there's so many great micro learnings through there where you can just take a section of a class. It's 4 or 5 minutes. But even if you don't have LinkedIn Learning, I looked on YouTube, et cetera. There's so many free resources out there that you have to vet, but you can keep it short. Then finally, I think for us, the biggest takeaway is it's so different from how we learn from our backgrounds from clinical, but microlearning works. And I think it's a real, and I'll share with all of you, I was really resistant to this when I started my master's in OD. I'm like, you need didactic work. Microlearning doesn't work. It's not enough. You don't go deep enough. And I think to even my best courses when I did my master's were the ones where they were short, quick hits, but it really got me thinking outside of that space. So that was our goal. How do we challenge people? How do we give them something to think about or ask questions that let it okay to be wrong? I think for one of our prompts, we said, what's been your biggest mistake in your career looking at this? And created that safe space that it's okay to have mistakes and what did we learn from that? So, and then the other big thing we learned, especially with a clinical floor, is time is our greatest commodity. How do we keep people on the floor working with their team so we're not pulling people away for long sessions? So they're half there, they're half worried about their team, but they can do this quickly. Or, it's easy to do on a train, right? All of this is available on your phone. You can do this commuting in. You can type little comments commuting in, and Padlet has a mobile app that you can use. So let's make it easy so people can kind of come to it in the way that works best for them. And then if anyone knows this concept, there's an internet concept called TLDR, which stands for too long, didn't read. And it's a really short, I go a little longer than one sentence, but yeah, someone may have heard. It's a one sentence, what do we do here? So I always like to start my communications with this, but we faced a big challenge. How do we elevate leadership without pulling critical nurses away from their teams? Our solution, microlearning, using small, high-impact lessons developed flexibly using Padlet. And then finally, the results, over 90% of participants reported stronger leadership skills, and over half built a deeper sense of community across units. So I'll pause there and really allow for more questions about what we did, how we did it, and we're happy to share anything.
Thank you so much again, Kelly and Catherine. And one of my questions, I think you addressed this at the start, but I can't remember. What was the group size that you had? And it sounds like your team has used this with some other learning interventions. Does there seem to be the ideal size group? Because I can imagine it could get a little noisy with too many participants, but have you kind of landed on a sweet spot with that?
We had, I want to say 35 to 40, Catherine,
Right, that's right.
for this group.
Right.
And with the acknowledgement that there's going to be weeks that someone's going to miss, and like that's okay. We tried to say, like, if you're going to take a pass, just try and miss only 1 week. But we've used this for groups up to 60 in terms of cohort-based learning. But for brainstorming, et cetera, we've used it for much larger groups. One other thing is it shows the name of the person in ours, but you can actually turn that setting off. So if you're really doing a brainstorming session, it can be totally anonymous who's posting. So you'll see the ideas coming up, and it can give a facilitator a way to say, I'm noticing a lot of you are saying X. So we've used this in some of our larger retreats with hundreds of participants. And it gives the facilitator a quick way. Instead of taking hands, people can go in really quickly with the QR code, type some answers, and it gives the facilitator those questions to dig a little deeper. So thank you for the question. Any other
I'm
questions?
curious. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was really helpful. Been playing around a little bit with the micro learning and doing series. One of my concerns, well, not concern, but a frustration, if you will, is getting that engagement on social media. We do, as Jessica said, we use Viva Engage, and I just can't get people to participate. So this is fantastic that you're getting that kind of participation. I'm wondering, are you setting expectations up front for when people are joining in a program, saying, this is going to be interactive, this is an expectation? Are you thinking that the presence of the senior leaders is encouraging that participation for the accountability? Have any insight as to how to get people involved? Because this is great engagement. I'm struggling how to get there.
So what I can tell you, and that's a really great question, is, I knew and still know that there has to be buy-in from senior leadership, right? So for me, every one of my senior directors had to be engaged, but I also had to be engaged as well. And it was really important for the leaders in the room to understand the why behind we were doing this. And even before we started the micro series, they were excited because they knew that this was the way that we were going to continue to grow, that we were using the AONL standards, and they knew that this is what we wanted to get to. But I do believe that without senior leadership buy-in, that it's very difficult to engage this number of staff and then to make sure that it continues. And the reason that we put the second micro series together was the number of leaders who came back to me and said, when are we going to do our next series? There's so much more for us to learn. So it was exciting to hear that, but I can tell you without that, it would have fallen flat.
Yeah. I think the other thing we really thought about and we're really tried to be at our first session mindful about is we didn't teach them anything at our first session. We had them be silly. We had them put a funny video. We had them write something funny in the posts. Padlet is back now, so I'll show it in just a moment. Just to show that it can be fun, it can be easy. Catherine commented live when I was showing them how to do it. Oh, this is great. I love it. So we kind of had that banter back and forth to show it doesn't have to be heavy. The real goal is to be light with this. And the way we managed it, instead of putting it out for a long time, every week we would send a note at the beginning of the week that your post is live. And then Thursday or Friday, I'd send a little nudge out, just a reminder, the new post will go up Monday. So any final comments, get them in now. And sometimes that was better go and do my initial post then. And we kind of checked as we were going along how it went. I think maybe it was week 3 or 4, we saw a little flag. And I said, Catherine, could you send a quick note out just to keep the momentum, not chiding, but like, I love what we've done so far. Don't forget to really keep that going.
And the other thing that we did during that week was I had a conversation with the senior directors and directors. So we're a smaller organization, so we have 4 in nursing. And I asked them to start commenting on people outside of their division and to try to build that momentum. And that worked as well because the leaders involved were saying like, wow, this is Erin who's commenting, and she's from the ED and inpatient. She's commenting on something I said in peri-op. So that was the other process that we put in place to make sure that we could continue that momentum.
Just one other quick question is when people post something on there, do they get a notification or do they have to go in there specifically and check it regularly? Like, so how do I know that other people have commented?
If they comment on your direct post, it will send you an email notification. Or I think I had them turn it off for likes just so it wouldn't be overwhelming and an already email dense, but they could see if someone commented, or if they commented on someone else's post and someone responded with an at, you can at Kelly O'Malley, it'll let you know. So it's a great way to keep it light. I will say though, people can turn off all those settings internally if it's too much for them and they say, you know, I'll commit to doing once a week. So there's some flexibility to that.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Let me pull up Padlet just to show you guys a little bit of what it looks like in the flesh. So it's a really simple page, right? That was a big thing of us. It doesn't want to be extra complicated. We didn't want to have a lot of clicks, but you can organize each week by a theme. So for example, I asked the question for our final week and I put Change the World by Eric Clapton was my piece of thing. My specialty is change management. So this, you know, well, everything is organization development and psychology. I'm always going to see that change management aspect underlying. But you'll see there were so many comments of where people were. You can put GIFs in, which makes it particularly fun. This is definitely one, I think, where someone used the AI to create an image of, I think they said it, they told me later, it was nurses that were angels, but they were also fighters. So you see our little boxing gloves. People actually really liked the AI image creation. I'll show you that in a moment. Some people put videos. There were tons of songs. And I actually learned a lot. We had a little We Are the Champions. So, and that was just 1 week's post of where we were at for our last week. But each week it really gave people a lot of space to kind of think about it. You can change the color of your post so people could feel that, you know, I'm not just in a box, I have some creativity. So you'll really see a little bit of that. And what I'll show you is I'll show you what you can do creating a post. It's as simple as this little piece at the bottom here. You would click it. It would come up with a subject. And then there's so many different options for attachments. You could attach another Padlet. You can do a link to something outside. You could use your camera on your computer to take a photo or record a video. For a different leadership program, we had them all talk about why they were joining a leadership program to start. And then everyone go in and watch about their different colleagues before they started. But I'll show you the AI image because I think it's pretty fun. Somebody shout out what you'd love to see. Feels like a little bit of like improv, admittedly, but I won't make anybody stand up after. No takers?
Exploding heads in the military.
Let's hope it's not too graphic, but you could say exploding heads. It'll draw your words, and it just takes about a minute to give you something. And I actually think it's better than the ChatGPT version of creating images. Yeah, so there's just different pieces that it could show here. And maybe you say in healthcare. So you can play around, you can add some different pieces, but it gave people some creativity. I was surprised how much this feature was used. So that's what it creates in just minutes, and you can get a bit more specific with it as you go. This one you see here is an oil painting of a basketball player dunking with an explosion of a nebula. So that's pretty specific for that one. But it also allows you to do AI speech. So you can talk through making it a little bit more accessible. You can add GIFs, YouTube, Spotify songs, and you could even add a poll. I think someone did add a poll 1 week is, do you guys find it hard to do X? And then all their colleagues are responding to their poll. So it's another layer that they can put in. And just to show you our very first week, because I think that kind of shows you how we made it fun to start. You'll see here, we just asked them, and it's loading all of them. Put something fun here. Hi, I'm this person. Here's a picture. And the other ones are loading a bit slowly right now, but people put some videos in, etc. So it's just a quick way to make it fun and make it easy for people to interact. And a lot of people commented on mine for that one to get started. So So I'd say for people in L&D, organization effectiveness worlds, if you find a leader like Catherine that's like, yeah, let's try it, let's figure it out. I think that's the real sweet spot. We've actually, using this example, we've been able to roll it out so many other places with leaders that weren't as innovative as Catherine to say, it works. It made people feel fun. How do we do it? And it's funny because a lot of times, I don't know if it's similar for you, we'll say, well, faculty won't do this. They're too serious. It's too hard. Our faculty love this the most. Our faculty love using this as a tool. And it's sometimes, I think sometimes the aura of where we are gets in the way. But when we could show this example, it really helped us to kind of get our foot in the door. Any other final questions?
Thank you so much, Kathy and Kelly.
You're very welcome.
This is very helpful. All right. Jess, I'm looking at the agenda in terms of some discussion questions. Is that something you wanted to facilitate, or would you like me to, or
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. I'm
It's
happy
okay.
to,
Okay.
because I think we had some good, and I actually had a first question too, just for the group. If anyone else is currently using Padlet in any of your programs, kind of alongside, anyone else using it? I'm realizing now that I just used it as a user in a coaching program with a university here, and it was really helpful with us to that point of brainstorming and being able to do all of that live also. Okay, let's see. So we have a couple good questions here, and maybe this ties even with Kathy and Kelly too. The first one: how can healthcare organizations better support the leadership development of nurses and clinicians? And with that, I'm kind of interested in anything else you do around those AONL competencies potentially too. Do you have broader education around that? And again, to the rest of the group, curious to hear how you focus on your nurse leaders and clinicians for development.
So I'll take a stab at that. For me, what's important is for me to understand where I'm having difficulty when it comes to having leaders be able to be a part of a learning session or to be able to understand what they need. What has worked so incredibly well for me is developing the relationship that I have with Kelly, because I can talk to her and say, Kel, listen, A, B, and C is happening. I don't know how to actualize it. I'm not sure what we need to do, but with her background, she can come back to me and say, this is what I think we need to be able to offer. This is what we need to put into place. And for Suffolk and the nursing staff there, that has really been the magic bullet, is having that reciprocal relationship where I can talk to her and say, how are we going to do this? How are we going to actualize or conceptualize this for the nurse leaders?
That's great. And I think it's such an important part that many of us in similar roles like Kelly play, of listening, what are the needs and how does it show up and what does it look like? And then doing that work of sort of connecting the dots on what's the right answer to address that.
And I can tell you, having been in this position for a while, I don't think there's a lot of VPs of nursing that understand the value add to have an expert in organizational effectiveness help you create what it is that you're looking to create. And if more of my counterparts understood that, I think there'd be many more programs and many more positive, successful interactions like what's happening with Suffolk right now.
Love that. We're going to put you on a road show at our location.
Oh, but it's the truth.
With all our leaders.
I wholeheartedly believe that. And it's capitalizing on those expertises to make you a better leader, to support your leadership team.
There's not many like Catherine out there that keep thinking of partnerships. And I'm curious if others face the same. You know, sometimes I think in our world we get stuck in well, run a team building. And it's like, well, what are you trying to achieve? As like, will that actually help us? So I think Catherine really like allows for that partnership to get great outcomes.
It's great. I think that is so key, is having that senior leader buy-in and advocacy and support, and not to make it feel like it's an HR thing or an L&D thing or wherever it sits. So any other groups want to talk about what you do for nurse leader and clinician development? I know we can speak to some of it. It's and we're in sort of an interesting, I think, transition in some ways. So UPMC has 42 hospitals now across Pennsylvania and into New York and into Maryland. And so we have always kind of balanced this like central versus decentralized approaches. And one of the things that we're really focused on right now too is looking at onboarding of our nurse leaders, and just how much, you know, we're kind of bringing them into with responsibilities and accountability, in addition to their day job, right? And figuring out the right ways to have touch points that are more kind of from a central standpoint, where they get connection with other nurse leaders and clinicians across the entire enterprise. Even just for more of maybe a sense of belonging, and understanding, you know, how's it look in your hospital compared to mine? And then also looking at putting into place some more localized efforts where groups will get together and actually, we're kind of calling it, and not we, my nurse leader counterpart is calling it thriving the wild, and sort of taking out groups in on units and really seeing and experiencing before they have to do a lot of direct leadership themselves, but really experiencing what it's like to walk around the unit and what you need to be looking for, how those pieces all fit together from your role as leader. And so we're excited to see kind of how we're always kind of adjusting and evolving. But I think we're getting to a good place of that right balance between centralized efforts and decentralized efforts. Right. Let's see, other questions. Barriers that you face, I think, with this group, with clinicians or with nurse leaders. I think many of us know them, but again, anyone interested in speaking to how you're managing some of those challenges or barriers? Got a quiet group today. I think we see, of course, some of just that challenge of time, and that's what I love about what you've shared, Kelly, just in the sense of a minimal time commitment, but how do you get the return on that? Which clearly you were able to through the results that you showed with the microlearning approach. Yeah, I think that's something we're balancing too. And I think that's why there is this focus on onboarding, because trying to figure out how do we protect maybe some of their time earlier on before they're really just entrenched in the day-to-day. And yeah, and also I think that's just we're looking at things naturally of like the turnover, and not even because we have so many hospitals, not even outside of the organization, but moving from, you know, a nurse who decides they're ready to step into that clinician role and have direct reports, and then to decide, nope, not for me, I'm going back to another nurse role in another hospital, maybe. We're seeing a lot of that kind of movement. And so I think that one of those things we're constantly considering is how do we make it appealing for a nurse to want to become a nurse leader in some format, and give them kind of a safe place to be able to share their challenges and also feel really supported. So Aubrey, I saw, that's what I was thinking. We have so many clinical leaders that don't necessarily see the value of investing time in learning. Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge too. And I think where we've been most successful is to the point that Catherine and Kelly shared of having that senior nurse leader be the voice of it, and this is the importance of it, and this is my ask. And so I think that's where we've seen the best traction too is, and I want you to protect this time to work on this. But I think we just run into the constant challenge of, I got pulled into staffing, I have, just the things that me sitting at a desk, I don't encounter and try to be mindful of when it comes to much of our deskless population. Just the reality of clinical care. Right. Any other points that or thoughts anyone wants to talk through, particularly related to nurse or clinician leadership development? Okay.
I think again, Jess, I'm just really excited about the model and just utilizing microlearning with this population because we do get that, we're so busy. I think one of the challenges that I still see is the self-driven versus sign me up for a class. And although people I think sometimes say I don't want to be spoken to or talked to, I want to be drive my own learning, but yet still if it's not on the calendar. So I like this format really. In experimenting with it, I think people are coming around, but sometimes we still fight that in learning and development. It's like I'm still used to that traditional learning where I was taught in that formal setting, but now you're asking me to drive my own learning. So this is really exciting. I think microlearning, I like that you kept it short chunks, really short and manageable and consumable for that population. And then having the accountability piece, it looks like you've kind of covered all your pieces there. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you so much. Kelly, thank you for joining us. Jessica, I don't know how you guys typically do this, so forgive me, but we have about 7 minutes remaining. If there is any pressing issues or questions the group has for one another, we could hold time for that, or we can end early. It's kind of based off of how everybody's feeling. Related or unrelated to this topic of discussion, just leadership development generally.
Megan, I do love that as like a recurring agenda item if we have any time at the end, just to leave any pressing discussion or topics. I don't have any this time, but I like saving some space for that.
Or anything we want to potentially hold time for next in June too. Now's the time to speak up and we can resource and look for potential topics as well.
I don't know, just a thought, Megan, is if, and it might be a little bit of crossover of thinking about, I think there's a diversity lens council that Nathan leads. I know that it has been ongoing hot topic of executive orders and impact to learning. And I don't know if everyone feels like they've got a good understanding of what that looks like in their areas. And we've been really lockstep with our partners in diversity and inclusion, with a real focus on not abandoning efforts, but of course being mindful of what we need to do to adjust messaging, et cetera. I don't know, just a thought. I don't know if anyone else, and that's kind of present right now, I think, for many.
Sure. So having a discussion as a council on that topic. I will also throw out the option. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. I apologize. Is we are no longer recording the DEI council calls, but as members, organizational members, many of you have access to that council on a regular basis as well. So if we can bring it here and have it during these regular scheduled LD calls, but I would also invite you if to join those DEI calls as well and have those questions. But Jess, the point is taken. We can absolutely bring the conversation here, but it tends to be a little bit more robust and open and transparent on those council calls. So
Yeah, which is a good thing, I think. Yeah,
yeah.
I was even thinking, I feel like there was a time maybe where the groups met together, which I didn't get to join, and I was so bummed I didn't get to. So I'm thinking maybe even that was along those lines of what could be interesting for the councils.
Yeah, maybe Malia and I look at maybe we can do like a shared call in August or something to that. It gives us enough time to plan. So, all right. Well, if there are other hot topics that people have questions, one, there's a few opportunities. One, you can post it on the group. We share a chat channel on our membership portal. So if there's a discussion forum that you want, Malia and I are also happy to post your question and people would be able to respond, not like what you just shared, Kelly, a little bit more formalized like Blackboard or something, but not as fun. There's no GIFs or AI image creations. Or if it's a topic that you want to bring to the council and present like a perspective on, or maybe ask some more questions, happy to entertain those for agenda items as well. So email Malia and I at lens@nchl.org and we can take everything into consideration for you guys to make sure these agendas are worth your time. So thank you again, Kelly, for joining us. Everyone else, Jess, you included. So appreciate you being here and we'll see you in June.
Good. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.